I met Eduardo in Melbourne earlier in the year, and I took a client over to Melbourne to visit him at Real Estate Australia. And I was amazed at some of the stuff that they did at Real Estate Australia, just taking agile lean practices and systems thinking to really focus the contact center around the client and use those practices that we traditionally normally see in IT organizations to really empower the staff and improve kind of the performance of the contact center. So Eduardo is really passionate about transforming contact center operations through innovative thinking, using people-centered smart practices like lean and agile. Eduardo started his career in the sales and strategy field and worked with market-leading companies in Europe and Australia in telecommunications, digital, and outsourcing service industry. Prior to founding the Agile Contact Center, Eduardo was with the REA Group and transformed their contact center operations using a systems thinking approach and applying lean and agile practices. I think Eduardo's talk's going to be pretty amazing, no pressure. And so I hope that you guys enjoy this talk. So I'd like to introduce you to Eduardo. Take it away, buddy.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Yes? Good. Good afternoon. Welcome to the exciting world of Agile and contact centers. Probably you can't find two more opposed words in the dictionary than contact centers and agile. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, I can convince you that you actually can merge those two. As Dan said, I'm Eduardo Nofuentes. As you can hear, both my name and my accent are not from here. I was born in Barcelona, so I'm from Spain, but I've lived 10 years in Australia. Hopefully that has softened a little bit my accent and you can understand me okay. Can you understand me okay? Thumbs up, good. This talk is part of the Agile enterprise in the Agile New Zealand, one of the topics. And it's a case study, it's a story of something that happened in Melbourne from 2012 to 2014, how we transformed that contact center from a traditional contact center to an agile contact center. I should say the company, as Dan mentioned, is the REA Group, which is the publisher, or realestate.com.au, is an online portal, property portal, similar to Trade Me in New Zealand, but just focus on the property part of the property transaction. So I should say that I did have no experience in contact center management when I took that role, and very little exposure to Agile. So how I got that role still a mystery to me, but probably that's for a different talk, how I got that role. But what I did have was experience using contact centers. As many of you, as all of you, hopefully you can relate to this talk. You all have suffered from traditional contact center operations. When you get your invoice wrong from your telco provider and you think, oh my God, I need to call them. And you put probably 45 minutes aside to make that transaction. Well, the same happened to me, so I knew what I didn't want to happen with the contact center that I was leading. Traditional contact centers, usually you can identify them because once you call, the first thing you need to do is navigate an endless options of IVRs. IVRs is that machine that tells you press 1 if your call is about this, press 2 for this, press 3 for that. When you press 2, then there's another sub-menu. And you have to pick, other 5 options. Or even worse, the ones that tell you, in a few words, tell us what your call is about. I don't know about you, but with my accent, that doesn't end up well. Usually I get sorry, I couldn't get that. And I go, I hate you. So another thing that happens with traditional contact centers is long waiting periods of time. I think you all have suffered from that as well. I was reading an article. There's a government organization in Australia that the average handle time last year was the average waiting time was 17 minutes. Before you could speak to someone, you had to wait 17 minutes. The same organization had 26 million abandoned calls. 26 million people could not talk to anyone. I'll leave it there. And the third one is once you finally speak to someone, the chances that that person is the one that can fix your problem are pretty little usually. They have to transfer it to someone else. So the experience goes like this. You call a 1300 or 0800 number in New Zealand, and you go through all the options, and finally, you say, yes, that's what I want someone to fix me. And then you wait for 10 minutes, and when you speak to someone, say, no, you took the wrong option. You picked the wrong option. I need to transfer to someone else. So I think I'll set the scene of what we're talking about here. Can you relate to that? Yes? Good. Usually those same contact centers, I find that suffer from the same things, which is low customer satisfaction, no wonder, low employee engagement, so contact centers, people in contact centers, the churn is, the attrition is very high. People usually don't last very long in contact centers. And the third, and more importantly for me, they work very isolated from the rest of the business. And it's a great source of information from the business. I cannot understand. And I can understand how companies keep outsourcing contact centers offshore. If I could choose, I could put your contact center in the middle of the company, because you're not going to get a greater source of information for your IT department, marketing, finance, whatever you do. So what we find at REA, which is the case study, was very similar, probably not as bad as the examples that I've given you. But we had a low satisfaction score. It was around 4. We weren't meeting service levels. People were quitting. They weren't happy with what they were doing. And above all, they were complaining about change. The whole team complained about change. And REA is a digital company. It's a very rapid growing company. We grew 30% year on year in the last 3 years. And there's a lot of things happening when you work for a digital, rapid growing organization. And the call center felt that all that change was thrown upon them. And that's the biggest complaint. I should put some context. So the contact center was relatively small. We're talking about 35 people. And we were dealing with mainly calls from real estate agents that were our customers. But some calls as well from people like you and me that were looking to buy or rent a property. We got around 750 calls a day and probably 250 emails. That's the volume we had to deal with. So, as I said, I had no experience. I didn't know how to turn that around. But luckily for me, the same time that I started working for REA, another person started working. That person is Nigel Dalton. Some of you might have heard of him. He's a fellow Kiwi. He's the CIO at the REA Group, and he's probably one of the gurus of Agile and Lean and systems thinking in Australia right now. And he grabbed me under his wing, and he did a lot of things for me and for a lot of people at REA. But probably the two most important things he did, one is put me into John Seddon's work, and I'm going to talk a little bit about John Seddon. And second, he recommended me a great Agile coach or Agile consultant. So her name is Sue Visage. So I sat down with Sue and said, how are we going to turn this around? What are the strategies we're going to use? And we came up with these 4. And I know I'm just showing 3, because hopefully at the end of this presentation, I'm going to do a little quiz and see if you can guess the 4th one. So I'm giving you 3, and you will have to give me the 4th one. Yeah, deal? Cool. So the 3 strategies we applied was a systems thinking approach, an agile mindset and practices, and I'll explain. It's been talked a lot in the last 2 days, but explain the difference between the mindset and the practices, and then some lean principles. I know it's a bit controversial to put that sentence up there in an Agile New Zealand conference, but looking back, I should say that Agile alone would have not solved the problems we had. It had to be in conjunction with those other 3 strategies. And I think there's been some talk as well during those 2 days about how Agile practices alone probably won't fix your business problem. So let's start with the first one, systems thinking approach. As I said, Nigel directed me into the work of John Seddon. John Seddon is an Englishman, probably the best way to describe John Seddon, if you don't know. He took Taiichi Ohno's work with Toyota in the 50s and applied to service organizations. He's got a really good book. And if you want to write down, it's called Freedom from Command and Control. It's a great book about systems thinking applied to service organizations. So if you work in a service organization, not a contact center, any service organization, it's worthwhile having a look at how he sees that systems thinking approach. Believe it or not, he also has a guide called he's got a company called a consultancy called Vanguard, and he's got a guide called the Vanguard View of Contact Centers. And the day that I read that guide on my second week at REA, Nigel said to me, we probably have doubled the people that have read that guide in Australia, because only him had read it before. It's a dry, it's not it's not your typical holiday reading, let me put it that way. It's a bit dry. So what I'm going to try to do is save you from that pain and just give you in one slide John Seddon's view of how to manage a contact center. And by that, probably any service organizations. So if you look at the diagram on the screen, all contact centers or traditional contact centers, we focus in here, in the point of transaction. That's where the customer, the man, hits the organization. And all the contact center managers that I know will tell you everything about what happens there. They'll tell you how many calls they get, what's the average time, what's the waiting time, all those metrics, traditional metrics in contact center managers. When they tell me how many calls they get, my second question is, how many can you get rid of? And they don't know. So John Seddon thinks that you shouldn't be focusing on the point of transaction. You should be focusing on the other 5 things in that diagram. I'll starting with the first one, customer demand. Understanding why your customers are calling you for. He divides the customer demand into 2, value demand and failure demand. Value is what the contact center was set up to do. Failure is something's gone wrong in your organization, and hence the customer had to call. Example again, bill, telco, it's incorrect, I need to call. That's a failure demand call. Some things go wrong, so I had to call the contact center. The second point is how much value are you adding to that demand that comes in? That's what you should measure. And I'll give you an example. When I started in 2012, the real estate agents still had to call us to change the password. Now, in 2012, you all know that anyone can change their password automatically without needing to speak to a person. So how much value were we serving customers? Yes. How much value were we adding? 0, 1, if you want. So the second thing you do is understanding how much value do you add for each demand. And the ones that you don't add any value, just redirect to other channels. The third point is how it flows through the system. Not all your customer demand, you're going to be able to resolve it here in the contact center. Some of it will have to be solved by someone in IT, or someone in marketing, or someone in finance. What you need to understand is how that demand flows through the organization. And I love the word flow rather than escalation. You hear that, we need to escalate this issue. It's not about escalating, it's about flowing, how it flows back and forward. If you had your contact center in Philippines, how do you think that's going to flow? It's a question. Not very well. The fourth one is the systems condition. That's what he calls, everything, how you set up. What are the roles that you have? How much do you pay? How do you reward the people? What are the systems they use? What are the processes they're using? Everything that has to do, with the contact center operations. John Seddon believes, like Deming, in the 95-5 rule, that 95 depends on the system and 5% on the people. So in other words, if you fix the system, doesn't matter who you put working there, it will work. Now, I'm not that much into the 95 and 5. I think the people aspect, or a service organization, is as important as the system. But who am I to contradict John Seddon or Deming? I'm just giving you what it worked for us. And the fifth one is the managerial thinking. So, if you have leaders in the organization that don't think that way and that still ask you for traditional metrics, that's not going to work. So we took this strategy and started applying, started listening to calls and see, all right, how much of those calls are failure demand? And we realized that 75% of all the calls that we're getting in the contact center were failure. So imagine a contact center operator, 3 of every 4 calls is someone complaining because something's gone wrong with the business. How can you be happy about that? Of course they're going to leave. So what we do is start eliminating that failure demand from coming into the contact center. Stop measuring things that don't matter. Start eliminating failure demand from coming in. And how do you do that? Following through the system. You have to follow that failure all the way in the organization. So I'll give you an example. We were getting calls from people like you and me, users, thinking we were the real estate agent. We were not. We were the online portal. And, we handled those calls really well. We said, look, no, I'm sorry, you got the wrong number. I can put you through to the agent if you want. So even the customer experience was good, from a customer point of view. Thank you very much, have a good day. The calls were short, so a normal contact center operation wouldn't have picked up that. Wouldn't be measuring average handle time. Oh, that's fine, it's only 35 seconds. But because we took that systems thinking approach, we pick up that all those calls were creating noise. Why do we want to handle those calls? So what we did is start following them through the systems to see where they were coming from. And they were coming from the mobile application of our properties. Our number was more prominent than the real estate agent. So just talking to our UX department and to our design department, we were able to change that, and we eliminated all those calls from coming in. So, even if you work on software development, UX, anywhere, make sure that you talk to the contact centers. They're the best source of knowledge and information for you. Use empirical data. Don't go to the business and tell them, oh, we got a bunch of customers, or we get a few calls. Use data. Use percentages. Actually, 3% of all the calls we receive are because, they think we are agents. And that, equates to that many people, that much money, that much time wasted. And the business starts listening to you. And then you start working well with the business and not in isolation. So then from there, by the way, all these photos are from that contact center, so the real photos on the contact center in Melbourne. So the only thing you need to do is create a continuous process improvement system that eliminates failure from coming into the contact center. That's the strategy. And then design a human system that works. Let the people that do the work take decisions, take control. And that's where Agile comes into the picture for us. That's where Agile works so well in our contact center. I'm going to talk briefly about the difference between mindset and practices. It's been talked in the last 2 days, but I completely agree what it's been said. When we started doing this, we started doing some blogs, and people will contact, like Dan, will contact and will say, we want to come and see what you're doing in Melbourne. And we got people from everywhere coming to see it. And I always said to the people, to the tours we had, I said, I can show you the practices. You're going to see stand-ups. You're going to see, non-traditional contact center things happening here. What I can't show you, what I can't teach you is the mindset. That needs to, you need to believe in that. That needs to be inside you. For us, the mindset was making sure that the four most important principles are Agile, were in any of the practices we adopt. So communication, collaboration, transparency, accountability. If the tools you use don't give you any of those 4 things, don't use them. And most importantly, if your Agile practice gets in the way of actually a business outcome, don't do it either. Agile is great, but to support the business outcome, not to get in front of the business outcome. I'll give you some examples of some of the Agile practices and how we apply them in a traditional software development. It gets tricky, starting with the purpose. So, how important it is, at the end of the day, things get done because people care about them. I think there's a much better quote there than what I just said. Probably, if you want to tweet it, probably use this one, not what I just said. But it's what it is. If people don't care about what they do, things are not going to get done. So we needed to work on the purpose with that team. And believe me, In a contact center, it's not as easy as you might think. If we go to any school outside, in Christchurch or anywhere in the world, and we ask 6 to 10-year-old what do they want to be when they grow up, I don't think we're going to find anyone that says, I want to work in a contact center. But people work in contact centers, and they want to do well. So how do you link that to the purpose? So we did a lot of work on that, letting the people decide what the purpose was for them, what they were there to do. And we did workshops. We let them come up with what it was. And to be honest, whatever they come up, doesn't matter what it is. What's important is they chose it. And then we did other workshops where they wrote in little index cards what that purpose meant on the day-to-day work. And we stick those on the wall. And when things went wrong, because you go through phases in any transformation, rather than take them to the metrics wall, we took them to the purpose wall and remind people why we were there to do. And that was much more powerful, in my view, than any metric that you can use in your teams. Stand-ups. I don't have to tell you, I'm pretty sure you all know how to run stand-ups, but in a contact center it gets tricky because you always need someone on the phone. So we had to go with 2 stand-ups to start the day, one at 9 and another at 10:30, and divide the team to do that. And we didn't follow probably the workbook of Scrum, of what did you do yesterday, what I'm doing today. What we realized is that what worked really well is allow the team to manage the daily operations on that stand-up. So the team, the people on the phone, will go and say, what happened yesterday? What do we need to do to adjust? Who needs to be in that roster, in that other? We didn't have a roster. The roster was a visual roster. We didn't have a workforce management planner to tell people what to do. People decided that. And decided that because we gave them that space through the stand-ups, the daily stand-ups. Sprint walls. Again, we had all our projects. We usually came from either retrospective or from that failure demand, and we put them in wall. And we work in 2 weekly sprint plannings, like software development, same thing. But rather than developing software, we're eliminating failure demand or making more valuable the demand or how we service that demand for customers. We tried the pairing as well, and it worked really well. Having some of the leadership team working with the people on the phone on some projects, and that way there's a lot of coaching going on as well as you solve the problem. Visualization of work. Again, I probably don't have to tell you, but you don't want things on spreadsheets on people's computers. You want as much information on the wall. And when I say information, it's relevant information. I've visited many contact centers in the last 3 or 4 years. And yes, they're very colorful, most of them. But they look like kindergartens more than places to work. Put relevant information on the wall, not basketball hoops. This one here, this radar here was a very simple but very smart way of solving a problem. The contact center gets hit by all the projects that happen in the business. And before that, there was someone managing all that in an Excel spreadsheet. So we came up with a way. The radar is a timeline. Outside is 3 months, in the middle is today. And all the cars there are the projects or products that are coming. So people knew very easily, all right, this product is launching, we need to start training people, or we need to start preparing, or this is how many calls going to get. Very simple. These took ages, and no one knew before. And retrospectives. I'm sure you all will be familiar as well with retrospectives. We use them a lot at the beginning, and believe me, when you ask a contact center consultant, what do you think is wrong? The first thing is like, why are you asking me? They're not used to be asked what's not working. And the first retrospective we did, the whole column of what's not working was full of Post-its. I was hyperventilating, and the Agile coach said, that's okay, it's good. It's good that it's all coming up. Much better than if they don't say anything. It means they are engaged in the process. So, and we didn't use it religiously, probably following the Scrum workbook. We used them a lot at the beginning, And probably at the end, when things were better, we didn't use them at all. So we used them as we saw them fit for the business outcome. So we've got systems thinking, we've got agile mindset and practices. And the third one is using some lean principles. So I'm going to give you an example of 3 lean principles we apply in that transformation. The first one is about rapid experimentation, learning fast, failing fast. And we've talked about as well, it's been talked about the last 2 days. That's a mindset as well. An example is we knew we wanted to develop an online chat with our customers. We only had telephone and email, and again in 2013, some customers choose to communicate with you through live chat. And rather than going through the IT formal process, the department said, what about we try this? And we went online, we bought a license from one of the providers, we spent $150. We talked to one of our friends in IT, and they embedded into our agent system, and we tried it with Tasmania agents. And no one complained. We didn't break anything. Customers love it. And then we went South Australia and then WA, and in 6 weeks we launched a new channel that cost us $300 a month, when probably in more traditional organizations would have cost $1 million and 18 months of project work. The second principle, I already talked about the IVR, but remove barriers for your customers. Make it easy for your customers to do business with you. Organizations that I speak to, they all tell me, oh, we can't do that. Our company is very complicated. No, you're not. You are overcomplicated. But from a customer point of view, it's very simple. You're just a software company, or you are a broadband company, or you are an electricity company. That's how simple it is for a customer. All those IVRs are because you're thinking internally, not from the customer point of view. And if you think about all the IVRs that we encounter every day, they probably all internally thought through. So make it easy for the customers. And remove the metrics that don't matter. And that applies to any team. I love that Deming sentence. If you give a manager a numerical target, he'll make it even if he has to destroy the company in the process. And the same applies for contact centers. You give a contact center manager, a target of average handle time of 2 minutes 30, he'll make it. But what's the damage that's going to cause in that customer experience or in that company? So remove those metrics. The only metrics we used was customer satisfaction, and it was through surveys from customers, and failure and value demand. They were the 2 things that we track. And let the team set the targets. Don't set a target. The team ended up setting targets about customer satisfaction. If they hit it, we'll have some award, and the team will spend it the way they want. Don't set targets as a manager in any type of company. So that's the end of the first 3. So we've got systems thinking, we've got agile, we've got lean principles. How are we going? We're good? Yes? Does anyone want to have a guess about the 4th one? Yell it out. Culture. Yes, around that, yes. What's that? Self-organizing teams. We did have, through Agile, self-organizing teams, but yes, it's touching that. I'll give it to you. Brave leadership. If you're an Agile coach or an Agile consultant sitting here, and you're going to work for any organization in any Agile transformation, let me tell you something. It's not going to work if the leader you're working with is not a brave leader. You can be the best theorist in Agile transformation, but if the person you are working with is not brave, in my opinion, it will not work. I think the biggest thread for agile transformations is people like me. And by people like me is people that are over 40, that comes from a non-agile way of operating, maybe even command and control, that goes up to the ranks, and when they hit 40, like me, they get to a management role and say, that's my opportunity. I get the corner office, I'm going to tell everyone what to do. And relinquish that power takes courage. It's not easy. I've tried to break down with what it is for me, brave leadership, in 3 very quick mindsets, very easy mindsets. The first one is about being a servant leader, and I think there's been a lot of talk these last 2 days about being a servant leader. But it's about that. It's about not caring who gets the credit. Be there to support your team, to remove blockers. Don't tell people what to do. Empower them. The second one is about having a coaching mindset. Developing all the people, develop all the leaders in the organization. Make sure you set time aside to develop other people. And the third one is about being vulnerable. Don't be scared of saying you don't know something. When I started there, I said to the team, I have no idea how we're going to transform this. And I think that was very powerful and helped us a lot in that transformation. People see us, as human. You don't need to have all the answers. Just tell them, I don't know, but I'm going to work with you to find those answers. And I'll work with you really hard to transform whatever needs to be transformed. So the results, they were good. Dan has seen the end result. Customer satisfaction went up, believe it or not. It started in the low 4s, and we end up in around 9s consistently. And that is because we were able to remove failure. Every year, we remove 16% of calls coming into the contact center. 16% in a business that is growing 30%. You remove all those calls, what happens? People on the call has more time to service customers, to train, to improve their knowledge, to everything. So customer satisfaction goes up to that point. And engaged teams, we did a survey and gave us an 88% out of 100. As someone said yesterday, I'm not a great believer of engagement surveys, but I can tell you that the tenure in that team is gone through. People don't leave. We've got an average tenure of 3 years in a contact center. That's unheard of. And that's because people enjoy working there. And if they leave to other parts of the business, which is great as well. And a customer-led team. So the failure demand went from 75% to 18% in approximately 18 months. And 18%, it's okay, in my view. It's okay. Because if you have less than that, it means that the company is not doing anything new. You want the company to still do things and break in things. So you don't want to probably lower than that. So a lot of people ask me, when did I think when that transformation finished? Or when I speak to new clients now as a consultant, they tell me, how long is it going to take to finish that transformation? As been said as well in the last 2 days, I don't think that any agile transformation has an end. It continues. It's probably continuing at a rate without me now. But I can tell you when I felt that we had done something very special, which is when that photo was taken. I was telling you about before the sprint wall and all the projects and tasks and cards we were doing. So we did our ceremonies, and at the end of the sprint, we took all the cards and the completed and put it on a spike. Yeah, people put it either on spikes or on fish balls. Yeah, are you a spike or fishbowl type of person? We choose spikes. So all the completed cards went to a spike. And after a few months of sprint planning, the spike got full. And someone asked me, what do we do with it now? And I said, I don't know. I'm not an Agile purist. Maybe we need to have a ceremony when we burn all the cards and dance around it. I said, I don't know, do whatever you want. And left. And the team decided to use all those cards to, if you can see, to build the word change and stick it on the windows of the contact center. And someone took a photo from outside of that. So for me, that's the moment that I thought, we've done something really special here. For a team that was complaining so much about change, to actually embrace it to the point that they actually put it in, in the windows of the contact center, I thought we had, made something really special. So that's the story. That's the case study of the REA contact center and how it transformed. Do I believe that this can be done in any other type of contact center? Of course. That's why I started my own business, helping all the brave leaders and all the brave organizations to do it. Rather than a summary, I thought I left you with some questions. Even if you're not a contact center manager, if you work for a service organization, think about these questions. Does your team or your company understand your customers' demand? What percentage of failure and value do you get in your contact center or in your service organization? Do you know the cost of that to your organization? Is your system designed from a customer point of view or from an inside-out view? How can you apply Agile practices and lean principles to your non-software development teams? We can. And how brave are you as a leader, if you're a leader? Or how brave is the leader in your organization? Or how brave is if you're an Agile consultant, how brave is the leaders you're currently working with? So that's it. That's my presentation. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Eduardo. Do you guys have any questions for Eduardo? Maybe we could take a couple of questions from the audience. And we'll give you a mic. Yep, Jonathan?
Thank you very much for your presentation.
My pleasure.
I read something about contact center, and I was wondering if you had similar experience. I've read about a transformation of a contact center where they were getting better and better and better to the point that they were not really needed anymore. And so the number of people that were at the contact center were decreasing, and at some point it's been limiting because people didn't want to improve more, because improving more meant getting out of job. Yeah. Did you have any similar experience, and is it limiting in any way?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, in our case, we actually maintained the same number of people through the 3 years. We didn't increase the headcount of that contact center. Which, it was a gain already for the business, because as I said, the business was growing 30% year on year. So you're telling them, no, I don't need 30% more people. We can do with the people that we have here right now. It's just they're going to do different work. They're going to do more value work. So yeah, no, we didn't go through that. We maintained the same headcount during the 3 years. If organizations get to that point where, where you don't need the contact center, well, I guess what you need to do then is help those people that are working, and they will have to be working really well, to find other places in the business for them to move on. And we had that as well. We supported moving people from our contact center to sales, go-to-market, operations, etc. So. An external contact center, that's already making me feel nervous for the reasons that I gave you. contact centers work in isolation from the organization. I don't think they work that well. You need to be, that flow of communication with the business needs to be. So an external contact center probably I don't think will be the best way to go.
Thanks, Jonathan.
What if you aren't working with brave leaders?
Say that again, sorry?
What if you're not working with brave leaders? What do you do?
Go home. Go home. I don't know. It's quite difficult. You can try. You can try to convince them of what brave leadership is about, but it's quite hard. And I think you can relate to this. I think when you're an agile consultant and go to an organization and the leader is not willing to take risks, you know the frustrations that does produce. So I think we should come up maybe with a contract of courage between the consultant and the leader before any agile transformation. That will be a good deliverable to get out of this conference. I don't have an answer for you, but that's something that I look for when talking to customers. Make sure that the leader that I'm going to be working with is someone that is ready to take risks, relinquish power, coach other people, being vulnerable. So I don't have the secret. I will say find another one.
So we've just got last two questions here. So I've got Jake at the back, and then we'll take one more question down there.
So I'm just wondering, you talked about how the churn rate was dramatically reduced when you guys sort of went agile. I'm wondering, is there like a point in time that you felt like this is the thing that made the difference, or was it just an accumulation of steps over time? What do you think impacted the culture and made people want to stay?
I think it was, as I said, the combination of using those 3 or 4 techniques in parallel. I think if we had used just agile or just systems thinking or just some lean principles, it wouldn't have worked the way it did. So I think having that systems thinking approach, but at the same time introducing those agile practices that made people feel so empowered and listened to. Yeah. So I think it was the combination of working in parallel or together, those 3 things that made it so powerful.
Thanks for that. It was great. It was a great talk. I'm just keen to understand. You guys obviously had a really good mindset in terms of working in the contact centre. Yes. How did you interface then with the business? Because obviously you had to work closely with them in order to get some of those issues or the failure demand resolved. Yeah. And how did that interface work? And did they have a similar mindset?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In a way, we were lucky because the REA Group, the company, is probably one of the most advanced agile companies in Australia. It's extended not from an IT point of view, but all the departments started to do in agile, and probably the contact center was one of the ones leading. But you're right. So when we started, we were working very isolated from the rest of the business. So how do you build those bridges? And you build those bridges by sending people there. Say, go to the stand-ups. Start knowing all the people in the IT or finance or marketing department. You just join, introduce yourself, go and tell them who you are. And then through data, that empirical data that I was telling you about. If you go to the business and you tell them, look, the customer, the 3 main reasons for failure are, those 3, and this is causing that, they will listen to you. Rather than going there and complaining, we've got a bunch of customers, or we've got a customer that has complained about this. And that builds that respect from the rest of the business to the contact center. We tried things, and you try things along the way. I was just thinking while I was talking. We did we invited people in the business to our stand-ups as well, and talk about just failure in those stand-ups. So you try to use some of those agile practices to build those bridges with the rest of the business. Use data, and don't be afraid of going and speaking to someone in the business.
Can we just thank Eduardo once again? That was a very good talk. Thank you, Eduardo.